I remember my first class, in particular, shoulder stand and shavasana, as that feeling of surrender. And something changed in me. There was something bigger and beyond this human identity, this self, this form. And that was very expansive and liberating. And I remember leaving feeling very peaceful and embodied. And the world looked a little brighter, shinier, for some reason, without any effort. I just saw more beauty around me.
Today's interview is with Melissa Spamer. She is my teacher, an incredible yoga teacher from Michigan that has traveled the world for her own training and her own teachings. She's worked with Donna Farhey. She's worked with and been taught by Angela Farmer. She is now based in Santa Fe, before that in Austin, Texas, where I met her, where she was doing yin yoga trainings, and she was teaching on Ayurveda yoga and how to implement Ayurveda in yoga. That's where I met her, and then she moved to Santa Fe, and she has her own studio, Breathe in Santa Fe. She trains teachers. She does amazing intensives in yoga training, and she has definitely changed my life as well as many other lives with her yoga. She's now also a licensed counselor in the state of New Mexico. And I'm so excited to share with you this woman that has totally and completely enhanced and enlivened my prana, my life force. I am sad to say that there was some technical difficulties and I was not recorded, and it's very sad. So you'll see an animated, beautiful Melissa in conversation. And then when it comes to me or longer segments with me, you're going to see an image of me. And I'm really saddened by that, but it happens. And I hope you enjoy this conversation around surrender with me and Melissa.
So welcome, Melissa Spamer. And we're going to talk today about surrender. Thank you for being here, Melissa.
Thank you for having me. It's a blessing.
So if, you pick and choose, but could you walk through a little bit your yoga journey, coming into it, and just the highlights of your yoga journey and what brought you to it, and significant moments that you felt maybe around the theme today, surrender, or maybe there might be other little moments just to highlight?
It's always a certain kind of quest to summarize such a broad path and a long path. But I began yoga in my late teens, mid to late teens. I think, like so many people, and especially at that age, looking out at the world. And really, for me, it was seeing a lot of suffering and having experienced suffering through my own body, at that moment in time, and wanting to find answers, wanting to find explanations. And so I was looking through a community ed bulletin because I was living in the Midwest and the rural Midwest. So this was 1992, so there was no yoga studio. And I remember seeing the word yoga, and it felt very familiar to me somehow. And I enrolled for this course. And I luckily had an exceptional teacher. She was a long-time teacher in the Shivananda yoga tradition, was a direct student of Swami Vishnudevananda. And so classical Hatha yoga, she was very versed and skilled in that. And I remember my first class, in particular, shoulder stand and shavasana, as that feeling of surrender. And something changed in me. There was something bigger and beyond this human identity, this self, this form. And that was very expansive and liberating. And I remember leaving feeling very peaceful and embodied. And the world looked a little brighter, shinier, for some reason, without any effort. I just saw more beauty around me. And so I was very devoted to the path very early on, committing really wholeheartedly and traveling to the Shivananda ashram and having powerful experiences at dawn and meditation. and guidance in that way, and then continued to search and seek teachers. And it really brought me all over the world, traveling. At one point, a friend of mine had passed away very abruptly, and it really rattled my world. And I was sitting in my office one day. I was a body worker and yoga teacher at the time. And I was sitting in my office one day and meditating, and something propelled me to get up and take the Bhagavad Gita. And I just opened the book. It was very automatic. And I just looked down, and the first line that I saw was, "Go and seek the true teachers. Go and seek the true teachers of yoga." And so I committed to a year circumnavigating the globe, a kind of pilgrimage seeking. And I rented my house and put my things in storage and closed my practice and sold the studio that I was, running, and set on this journey. And it was very magical and interesting and beautiful. And that was also,
how old were you?
I was then 20, just turning 27, so 26, 27. Yeah. So I went to Northern California, and I was studying with Kali Ray at the time, and I deepened my studies with her and with her teachers. And then just in California, exploring different teachers there, method styles, and I had already done some of that. And then I was at the teachers conference in Palm Springs and met Angela and Victor, even though I'd known Angela before from previous women's retreats. And this was in the year 2000 or so. And it was very clear that Angela and Victor were the next people I needed to study with. And so from there, I went to India, studied with T.K. Deskachar, and I'd studied with him before, different trainings, intensives, and that was life-changing in many ways.
Did you have that same feeling with him of like, this is one of my teachers?
Yes, absolutely. He's such a powerful human. And one of the things that touched me so much is the true kindness at the Mandram from the teachers that are there. It was so warm and kind and humble. And, I'd read Health, Healing, and Beyond, which is Deskachar's biography of Krishnamacharya, and that changed my life as well. And that's what led me to seek to study with Deskachar. And I deeply appreciated him. And even though I didn't see him as much, because he really stopped teaching so much in the West, but always this thread heart connection to him and his power. He was at times in the lectures I attended, he was so bright and fierce and would state what he felt clearly. And that was not something I experienced everywhere. He would state his opinions about things. He would reveal his emotions. And I found that to be really helpful. And so many other stories from there. But I eventually settled into studying primarily with Angela Farmer and Victor Van Kooten. And at that same teachers conference in Palm Springs, I sat Ramajyoti Vernon, who is very well known for bringing many swamis and yoga teachers from India to the United States. At one point, I think she had something like 9 swamis living in her house in Berkeley. She came from, her mother was a yoga practitioner and studied with Yogananda, and she was a very profound person. And she spoke on the first day of the conference in the morning, and this beautiful woman with this large presence and this long molasses hair took to the podium, and just hearing her voice, it's very profound voice. I think people would agree with that. And something in me sunk very deep inside. And there was this element of surrendering to her voice, to her presence. And it literally, like, my jaw dropped. And I just thought, I had no idea that this woman existed and that someone like this existed in the world of yoga, because she had taken yoga, her practice, really off the mat in the 80s with the threat of the Cold War, and she brought 3,000 Americans to Russia. She helped legalize yoga in Russia, or the USSR at the time. So she was very inspiring to me of really living the teachings of yoga, and eventually founded a Center for International Dialogue. And I did many trainings with her and that as well. And she taught all of that really from the Yoga Sutras. So she was a master teacher, even though she wouldn't say that, out loud. But that's where her teaching would come from in terms of conflict transformation, when she'd sit with warring nations or nations in conflict or peoples in conflict. So that is primarily my path, I would say. And that was at a point, and it just continued studying with Rama intensively, continuing study with Angela and Victor intensively, and of course other teachers along the way. But those are my, as people are saying now, root teachers, right? My primary teachers that really impacted my view. And I think I need to mention this too. When we're looking at surrender, and I know you mentioned yin, and I'm in that world of teaching yin yoga, but also in the concept of yin and Taoism, that these were all women, and they had this female presence. My first teacher was a very powerful woman, very adept yogini, and I use that word cautiously and with respect. And I do believe to be true, this, being in the yoga world now for 33 years. And then Angela, who blazed a trail really for so many women to embody themselves and to have a true and clear voice about who they are and their own power. And when Angela left also the Iyengar method, then Rama followed, and so many people followed behind her, right? But I knew I needed to see powerful women and be reflected with that and to learn from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of this journey, the little bit I, know about your journey too, I'm curious how injury, your personal injury and or your healing, how that's integrated with your yoga and this practice of surrender. So I know if, and I can cut anything too, by the way, if we need to, but I know that you had mentioned something to me in my training about injury supporting you or having injury in your pelvis. I don't know quite what that was exactly, but and then also your recent kind of healing from cancer, how those inform your yoga and surrender.
It's a really important question, and I've been thinking about this as I know I'd be talking with you. So when I was very young, when 2.5 years old, I had a very severe illness and almost died. And I don't remember this, but my mother would say I walked around like a little old lady because I was in a lot of pain. This little 3-year-old walking around like I was 89 or 120. And then I, in my teens, I developed a chronic pain illness. And that's something I just lived with for years and tried to figure out what it was because no one really understood it or knew. And that involved pelvic pain, very much so, primarily, but also pain in other parts of the body. And so that was really the inspiration, too, of continuing on this healing path, studying Ayurveda and trying every diet under the sun and supplements and healers and shamans and seeking everything to find reasoning for this. Right? And eventually, this same chronic illness led to cancer. In 2022, I was diagnosed with a very lethal form of cancer. But it was caught early, which is very rare, and I'm very fortunate. And so when we're managing pain, I think yoga practice can also help those pain receptors calm down, our nervous system calms down, and there can be a quality of acceptance, of what is. And I think that is what surrender is, to surrender to what is. And when I received a cancer diagnosis, I think for anyone, even though I had had young friends die of cancer and children in my life and periphery that had had cancer, it's still surprising when you get a cancer diagnosis. And I read it through my patient portal like so many people do, and you see malignant cells and And it's scary
Yeah.
because I know this type of cancer and I didn't know anyone who survived it. So in that moment,
Do
I
you
could
mind me
say
asking what kind of cancer?
ovarian.
Yeah.
And what I didn't know is people say, I have ovarian cancer, I have lung cancer, I have uterine cancer, I have bone cancer. But I didn't know there are many other forms of cancer within that. So
Yeah.
I learned at MD Anderson that there are more than 50 subtypes of ovarian cancer. And my oncologist there said, you have the most aggressive and fast spreading of all those 50 subtypes. So, more fear, right?
Yes. Oh, gosh.
And
Yeah.
of course, I'm reading every research article and I'm doing all the things to try to treat myself in the best way that I could. So that was a whole other journey of discernment. But in the moment of the diagnosis, it felt like the particles of energy or light that forms the world really started slowing down. It was like time started slowing down. And I know people have this experience with certain news, right? Information or experiences. And there was just this very clear message of the things I wanted to do before I died. It was like, oh, okay, then this is what I need to do. And that clarity, in that moment of clarity, I had never experienced before and haven't experienced since then. But it informs my life all the time now because it was unexpected. I had a surgery. I said, oh, it's fine. Stitch me up. And then it comes back that it's malignant. I was taking a growth out. And then I had to go back for another surgery 4 weeks later. And that was really hard to have a abdominal surgery. And as those scars are healing, to be cut open again and have more tissue removed and parts of my body removed. And then there was injury to an organ, right? So then there was more pain, and I had a blood clot that was near my heart. I had nerve damage in my pelvis and leg. I had a hernia from the surgeries. All of these things were really challenging. And we can choose to not undergo treatment, to not have surgeries. But I didn't want to choose that. I wanted to have more time on the planet and this body. And so that, I think about illness, we surrender to it because it is what it is. We can try as hard as we can to prevent things and to live longer, but we can't control certain things. I learned I have a very rare gene mutation, right, too, which gives a propensity for pancreatic, ovarian, and breast cancer. So that is what it is. I can't necessarily change that. Even though I believed through my bones, heart, and soul that we could change that, right? I could just eat the right foods and juice fast and meditate and see the right healers, and I could cure myself, right? And I realized in this situation, no, it was so humbling. So humbling. Physically, because I couldn't move for a period of time, and emotionally. And then you face, I faced chemotherapy and so many people getting a port placed. And I remember the moment of receiving the first chemotherapy infusion. And I remember in that chair just surrendering, using my yoga practice to meditate and to receive that which could kill me without the 16 or 17 other pharmaceuticals that they're giving me to counter that, right?
Yes.
But to surrender to it, there's nothing I could do. I chose this treatment and to surrender to it after much research and consulting 3 oncologists. And so that was a moment of surrender. And each time I went to the chemo suite with these women that were in much worse circumstance than I was, how do I enter this room bringing my yoga practice? My presence, how is my presence as I enter this room? How do I engage with the nurses? How do I engage with the other patients? What is the energy I'm bringing? And as I laid in that chair, and the drugs, of course, take over, and there is a feeling of relaxation from it, all the Benadryl. But it also felt like just surrendering to what is again and again and again, the effects of that treatment. So it was a major life-changing moment. I am changed. My views of the world are changed. My views of myself have changed. And I think changed for the better in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of magical thinking disappeared. Yeah. So that's good.
I feel like I'm on that path a little bit too, of like meeting the combination of like the dreamer. I can be the dreamer, but then meeting reality as well, and trying to surrender to some of that. Um, Thank you for sharing your process. And just to share a little bit, like my mom just, I think in August, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and very similar to you in that it was, one of the breast cancers that's the most aggressive, yet she caught it really early, thank goodness. But I went with her to the cancer treatment a month ago, her second round, and I know what you're talking about, that room and that space and how to hold that space. Um, it's deeply humbling, and I appreciate you talking about this discernment that we have to make as yoga teachers, where we believe in, the Eastern system and the metaphysical, while also surrendering and finding what we need in the Western offerings as well, the Western medication and the Western path of healing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I feel the integrative approach is ideal. We have this technology, we have this knowledge. We live in a time that has so much to offer us in terms of our longevity by preventing death.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, it was just so informative, all of that. And that, because of the neuropathy that comes with chemotherapy, I had neuroacupuncture twice a week. My oncologist was also a nutritionist. So she, had a lot of knowledge around food and nutrition, and taking supplements and eating certain ways, and how to support, and herbs, taking different herbs to help counter some of the inflammatory effects of the chemotherapy. And then yoga practice. It feels different to do yoga practice when you're going through chemotherapy too. So again, that surrendering to what is, just continuing to surrender to what is. Mm-hmm.
What do you think for some people, I think they struggle with what is surrender versus giving up? What's the difference between resignation and surrender?
Yeah. So there's this feeling that if we surrender, it's a collapse, right? There's a collapse. And that's the farthest thing from what it is, right? To surrender is to be fully conscious of yourself and what's around you, and to be clear in that, engaged in that, and yet letting go of the armoring and the hardening that separates you from life, and that separation causes that collapse, that apathy. It's very different. It's like laying on the sofa to binge on Netflix, collapse, right? To being in Shavasana, a very powerful Shavasana, right? It's a different state of being or mind.
Yeah, I like how you're talking about the separateness. And I think sometimes that separateness, the isolation creates like a hopelessness about life, versus when you're in that deep surrender, like yoga, there's a faith in life. Even if the outcome isn't necessarily what you think or what part of you wants, there's this sense of connection with whatever happens. I'm still connected to life.
Absolutely. I'm still connected to life, to everything. Yeah.
How do you feel like this shows up with you? Because I know maybe you're not doing it as much, but you're doing Ayurvedic counseling. How does surrender show up in the doshas and your Ayurveda counseling? I'm curious.
Well, one is first learning about that for a client, of course. And I'd see this in school. I, studied with Dr. Vasant Lad, did his whole program. And as people are learning about their doshas, we have a bias. We have a bias, and so we think we're one thing. And sometimes it's correct, but sometimes it's not. So I think the first thing is coming to a place of acceptance of what that dosha is, what that elemental balance is, and then what are those qualities that tend to show up that can affect our emotional state, our perceptions, our physiology. And when I'm making recommendations, which is a big part of the Ayurvedic process, it's like watching the resistance to change. And we all have it, again and again. I'm also a licensed counselor and do a lot of trauma therapy and work, but there's this resistance to change because we know the familiar. And so that's what I notice comes up. And so how to soften that resistance. And that to me is like massaging someone into a way of surrendering again to maybe changing foods that they're eating or their daily rhythm or how they're moving their body. So there's that as well. I think it comes with consciously being aware of making a different choice and letting go into that choice so change can occur, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not an Ayurvedic counselor, but I kind of include it in my classes or in my yoga therapy in terms of just elemental yoga therapy. And one thing that I feel like that was really freeing for me and that I try to pass through to clients as well is the surrender of, our experiences, our symptoms, how we feel like our patterns are going to the elements. Mm-hmm. Like versus it being like me or I'm wrong, that kind of shame of that. And for me, like surrendering to my pitta, which you helped me see more. I thought it was very vata, but you're like, no, you're pitta. You helped me see that. And surrendering that to a little bit now when I feel those pitta symptoms, I'm like, okay, that's too much fire. It's not me, I'm not wrong, but it's too much fire.
Yes, it's very, very a big part of, I think, the learning in Ayurveda that's possible because you're looking at elements, which also depersonalizes it, and you're looking at qualities, right? The different qualities that make up this material world that also compose you. And so we might look at a pitta quality of fire, of being sharp, and how does that quality show up in your life? And is there too much or too little? Is there excess or deficiency, right? And so then it's not I'm wrong, which there's so much of that, so many everywhere, really. There's something wrong with me. There's just, it's too much fire or air, and this is how it's showing up. Or, you have too much of that light quality, and this is how it's showing up. And the other thing I try to really do as much as possible is amplify the really positive qualities about your particular constitution. Like what are those incredible qualities about Pitta dosha? What are the incredible qualities about Vata dosha or Kapha dosha? And that, have respect for your nature because there's no one else on the planet like you. And so how do you build that compassion through, depersonalizing it at first and then getting to know yourself in this intimate way. And then, your relationship to those qualities which show up in food and relationships and emotions and changes. There's change that's happening gently. Gently. Yeah.
Was there a moment, it kind of reminds me of like what you were talking about with the resistance and the, alongside maybe that kind of, I'm wrong, I need to change. Was there a moment for you in your own journey where you kind of stopped trying and that surrender that you remember, stop trying to maybe what a lot of people feel like fix myself in this world of, healing?
So I think this is layered, because I still struggle with it. There was living into a cancer diagnosis publicly as a yoga instructor and an Ayurvedic practitioner and teaching classes through treatment because I really had to continue. And there is this feedback, verbally, non-verbally, of you caused this. And there is a belief, I think, in our culture and probably other cultures where you cause your disease because of your lifestyle or your diet or your stress or all of these things. We take it on as ours. And there's therefore something wrong with us because we've caused this suffering. And I disagree with this. Sure, we need to take responsibility for our actions and learn about that and become more conscious of those. But when we can get to a place of accepting, again, it comes back to that self-acceptance with compassion. Because I still, it's not like there have been moments of surrender, but I still, for what I had to really work with, I didn't cause, what did I do to cause this suffering while I was going through? I mean, it still comes up. And then the blame that comes from other people and the narrative that we hear all around you, eat blueberries, they're antioxidants, they're going to reduce, anti-cancer. And I'm like, okay, I don't believe that. But what can we grasp to have hope for, I think the main thing that yoga has taught me, because I've chosen, and I don't know how I chose this, but I chose loving, kind, warm-hearted teachers. And they're mirroring, right? Those mirror neurons, they're mirroring back to me, help me be much more loving and kind and compassionate to myself. And so even though I might loop into what did I do? How do I need to improve this? What am I doing in anything, my work, my relationship, that is causing suffering in some way, shape, or form, or imbalance or disconnection. But then I offer myself compassion. Like, we're just human. We're just trying, to live well. And I think all of us are hoping to know love, to really experience that. And that's a process of surrender in and of itself. But I think it requires, after all this time, and a lot of therapy, but I think it requires being in good company, so that the people around you are reminding you of who you really are, which isn't that thing that is wrong and needs to be fixed, right? So you start to disrupt the narrative that I need to improve myself. I have a very beautiful, wise, and powerful friend, teacher. I haven't seen her in some time. Her name is Aditi Devi, and she spent years studying the Kali Kula, and which I talked to you about that as well. And I think you read her book, maybe, or
a little bit of it, I think.
Yeah. But she said, she's teaches to a lot of women because of her work and her studies, and she's such an honest, raw, real teacher. And she said that this constant cycle of self-improvement is rooted in some form of self-loathing. And that's what I feel, need to get to, is where did that narrative originate? How is it reinforced in our culture? And how can we uproot that self-loathing, right? By understanding it, where it came from, how it formed in you. And then once you look at it and see it and hold it in your hands, ideally then there's compassion for how it formed. And then there can be a release of that slowly as you get to know another way. So surrounding yourself with others, I feel, is really important. Being reminded of who we are, and looking at the roots of where those patterns of suffering occur. And that's one of the things that I kind of was reflecting upon, is in order to surrender, whether we're surrendering when we're birthing a baby, whether we're surrendering when we're really ill, or we're surrendering when we die, we have to let go of all the armor. And how do we do that? It doesn't just drop necessarily. Right? There are moments of spontaneous samadhi, I think, that occurs. Right? I do believe that. But then you come back to the humanness again, right? As Jack Kornfield's book is coined, After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. And so, what is this armoring? How did we start to armor ourselves? How did that occur? And through peeling away the layers or deconstructing this garden that is yours, you get to know yourself, and hopefully with the right guidance and support around you, because we can't do this alone. I think this is the purpose of a teacher, in effect, or counselor, or beloved friends, partners. But to then hold it and look at it and understand it and hold love for yourself through that process. But it's not easy. It's very difficult, and it can take a lifetime or many lifetimes, right, to do that. So patience.
Yeah.
Patience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of your life force to do that. And I love what you were saying about it being rooted in self-loathing. That's been a huge part of my own healing, is seeing and surrendering to the fact that I do hold that in my lineage, and seeing it where it came from, even from ancestry, kind of, which is another type of healing, right? And then being really soft when like you said, spontaneously samadhi can come up. I feel like the same with self-loathing. It's coming under, just like
Sure.
rises up, and
Sure.
you're like, oh, there's that again. Okay. And then that work to kind of hold it and be like, okay, that's
Yeah.
here. And then releasing it gently over time, even back to my ancestors, like, this is yours. I'll hand that to you.
I think this is where yoga can be a really beautiful path to understand the mind. And we're living in such exciting times with all that's being uncovered in neurobiology and neuroscience to understand the mind and the brain. But yoga also gives, especially in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it gives such a beautiful way of how to cultivate that awareness of the spontaneous self-loathing, those vrittis, those vitiations of the mind, and shining a spotlight on all of it, without the spiritual bypassing, which so often occurs. It really does. It's much easier. We don't want to look at all that dark,
Just
grimy stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I just want to be in the light and talk about positive things, and there's a rigidity to that. There's also, I see and feel when I'm with people in that way, there's some armoring, there's something they're protecting again, and holding compassion for that. Yeah. I have this quote from Rama Vernon in the second chapter, verse 45 of the Yoga Sutras. So by surrender to God, samadhi is attained, right? And this is Ishvara Pranidhana, the 10th of the yamas and niyamas. So you go through all the yamas and then all the niyamas, and finally you get to the surrender to something beyond yourself, so that you can shed this self-identity to some extent. It's not connected to disassociation, which I want to emphasize, again, like collapse, but that you're fully embodied. And in that embodiment, I feel of love, because how else can you truly surrender? Then that can occur. You can let go. It's the deepest letting go we know, and we've all had experiences of this letting go. It's just extended, and maybe with some different qualities of awareness. She says, Ishvara Pranidhana is the awakening to the realization that whatever we have desired is already within us. There is nothing more to want, to do, or to be. There is nothing more to want, to do, or to be. And this is very countercultural, because culture is saying all the time, we need to want more, we need to do more, we need to be more. And if we're not, there's something wrong with us. So, yeah, surrender is countercultural.
Yeah.
And I think unknown to a lot of people.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing her words and the yamas and niyamas into our conversation. It is striking me now that you said that, like, it is that last of that process. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Like, it makes sense, right? It
Yeah.
makes sense to be the last place,
And
because you
that,
have to go through all the layers of the mind to get there. You have to go through your trauma. You have to go through the relationships that cause you pain. You have to honestly look in the mirror at yourself and others. It's a long, arduous journey that's insightful and beautiful too, but it is a commitment, right, to get there.
yeah. Um, Looking at time and wondering, I have a couple more questions, but I might just choose one. Some of it you've already talked about. Is there any kind of daily practice that you would suggest for someone that might be just starting this idea of Isvara, Pranadad, and surrendering? Is there anything that you would give to someone that maybe is in cancer treatment or in burnout or in kind of that mental health, whether it's small or big crisis, that you would invite them to just start something, that takes very little but could be the seed?
Mm-hmm. Yes. One thing, depending on where they are in their nervous system, but I think the best practice that's coming out of yoga and Ayurveda is yoga nidra, right? So shavasana and guided relaxation, imagination, that can be one of the most profound practices. And to do that daily, that's the commitment. That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
So that you can build that resilience in your nervous system, because it takes time and repetition to get there. But if the mind is too activated, the nervous system is too activated to lie down in shavasana, and it's not going to work for some people, then I find I teach very simple bilateral vinyasas. So they're very slow and simple with breath awareness, guiding the movement. So you're doing opposing action at the same time between the right and the left, or the front and the back. So you start to integrate the hemispheres of the brain a little bit more, to my knowledge, from what I've read and how I experienced it. So it calms things down, right? It integrates and calms, so that it also directs the mind. Because when you're doing that focused bilateral movement, you can't think about anything else, because you have to use all of your attention to coordinate that breath movement. And so I find that it can be very steadying for the mind, right? Yeah. And then you build to getting to Shavasana, Yoga Nidra, and practicing that letting go, that letting go, that letting go. One of the things I thought of mentioning as a side note is I've been teaching yoga for 28 years, something like that, and teaching on the Yoga Sutras and talking about impermanence and talking about death and dying, and because these longevity sciences, and I was very surprised by the response I received. This is another teaching I received from being a chemotherapy patient, a cancer patient, moving through the world. I mean, I traveled and taught retreats while I was going through chemotherapy. Wow. So I got response in airports. And I didn't try to put the fake eyebrows and the eyelashes and the wig. I was just myself with a hat or a wrap. And the repulsion people had, that I could see on their faces, the fear really is what it was. And I realized how deeply embedded this fear of death or suffering, disease that is beyond our control, is within us. And it's very unconscious. But to be able to be bearing witness to this, and I don't think I would have witnessed it as clearly had I not had all of these years of study and practice in yoga. So that was very surprising to me, to watch the response around me and people's anxiety about their mortality. And that, to me, is the last and ultimate surrender. Like that line from Mary Oliver's poem, I don't want to die full of arguments, right? Resisting and arguing. So this is why some say that yoga is really a science, a study of dying, of death, our relationship to death. Ayurveda, the science, the study of life, our relationship to life. And so this is, we practice Shavasana at the end. Ishvara Pranidhana comes at the end of the yamas and niyamas. So we're starting to build that capacity to not only be, understanding the inevitable, but also to, working with that mortality piece, but also being brave enough to look into our suffering. Because if we don't, it's going to be guiding us in the background of our mind. And we can never really surrender if we don't look into the root, the root of everything. Yeah.
When you were talking, I felt Desikachara really strongly, both because I think in Vinaya Yoga, there's a lot of bilateral
Yes.
movements. Yeah.
So I've circled back to that because I also live in a place, a demographic where there's an older population. So the forms are simpler, and working cognitively with the brain is important. But I return again and again to those beautiful, simple, therapeutic vinyasas from the Krishnamacharya lineage that was taught through Deskachar and Krishnamacharya's teachers. Yeah.
And I just shared a quote from him. I'm not going to get it exact here because I don't have it in front of me, but around if we don't do what you're talking about, it's pretty much saying what you're saying. But if we don't look in the mirror, if we don't look at our own suffering and our own patterns with suffering, responses to it, then we're just going to be prisoners of our those habits.
That's right. That's right. And no one wants to feel that way. And so then people act out in all kinds of ways, right? And be in that, from that cage, from that imprisonment. And isn't this what yoga is ultimately leading us to, is freedom? But it can be very abstract for a lot of people. But that freedom is quieting that voice of self-loathing, that there's something I need to fix in myself. Coming to a place of acceptance, and through that acceptance, compassion, so we can be kinder and gentler in the world. That is what we need. As the Dalai Lama has said, we need more warm-hearted people, more kindness and gentleness. And it does begin with ourselves. Because if we're treating others well but not ourselves well, it's false, right? Yeah. It's false, and you can feel it. And that can lead to just more burnout, more disconnection. So that cycle again, yeah.
It's isolating, like you deserve this, but I don't.
Sure.
Isolating.
That's often, yeah. The deserving of love again. Deserving of love. And being brave.
I'm feeling so powerful and tingly and in love with this conversation and with you, Melissa, as always I am. I was drawn to you very much, the way that you speak, being drawn to your teachers for those very same reasons, and didn't always have like exact words for it, but just felt this calling to be in your presence, in your warmth, probably, connected to that same vibration that you found with your teachers. And I feel it here today too. And I'm just so grateful.
There are many, many extraordinary, beautiful people that we're, walking the path behind. And to remember those people, remember those teachers and their journey and how it informs us. And, we're on that path together.
So I'm going to launch into some quick fire questions, if that's okay to end.
I'm a little nervous, but I'm willing.
Okay, most of them are pretty on the surface. So the first question is, what makes your spirit expand?
The breath. Easily the breath.
And what makes your spirit contract?
Violence. Violence.
What is the next destination, or maybe it's an event? It could be a place or an event that's on your bucket list.
Bucket list. I've been actually checking off my bucket list.
I was going to ask you because you had that moment of like, what do I want to do? Yeah.
So, and I've been doing that. It's been wonderful. It's like, what? Anybody out there, don't wait. Just don't wait. Just do it now. Do it now. So I've been checking it out. But I think one of them is to continue this pilgrimage to these places on the earth where the goddess culture was really alive. Like I just pilgrimaged to Delphi a couple months ago, and to feel where they were worshiping Gaia at the center of the universe, the center of the world, according to the Greeks at that time, and to put my feet there and to breathe there. So, yeah. So continuing, I have a whole map laid out of places I want to go where the goddess was alive and worshipped.
Where's the next one? Do you know, or not off your head?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I'm traveling personally. I'm going to Ireland where I've done that same thing. And then Greece, I go again and again and again and again.
Yeah. What do you collect that says the most about you?
That's a good question. Scarves.
I've been meaning to say I got this one from you.
Yes. So yeah, Holly's wearing the scarf that I got her. That's the truth. If you went into my home, what would be the collection? It's, textiles. And in my other life, I was also an art student and studying textiles. So I have a great love of that no matter where I am in the world, appreciation for those artists. And that's one thing I collect probably the most of.
Yeah.
To wrap myself in that artistry.
And what do you wish you could learn?
I am continually on this path of wishing that I can learn to love more, to love better, to love more and better, with vulnerability, with vulnerability.
What do you wish you could unlearn?
I think, like we've been talking about, that self-imposed, to some extent, self-loathing or inner violence, and I give talks about that. All the small little micro abrasions that we do to ourselves. To unlearn that. And I'm going to be bold here, and my passion is to unlearn the inner misogyny that all of us are embedded in, especially in these times. It's time to really look at that. So I want to continue to unlearn that.
Yeah.
Right.
Which emotion has been your biggest teacher?
I think being patient, because I have pitta, I have high pitta, and I can go quick into anger, even rage at times. So at the world, rallying against the machine of why, which is what started me in the beginning. So, yeah, it's been a great teacher, though. I have in my office, Woman on Fire.
I remember that. I remember that.
Flames of transformation.
2 more questions. If you could meet your soul before you were born, what would it whisper to you?
I think just be gentle. Be gentle. Be gentle.
And if you could meet your future self 10 years from now, what will it thank you for?
Staying the course. Staying on the path. Continuing to peel back the curtains.
Thank you. I'm going to bow to you. I can't, again, express enough my gratitude for your words and your wisdom, Melissa, and your vulnerability here with us. And namaste.
Thank you so much, Holly. Deep bow right back to you. So much gratitude for you. Great light you're carrying.